Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's your host, John Scardina. I am so freaking pumped for this episode. 1 year ago, I did a podcast all about the tornadoes that went through essentially half of the United States. I'd moved to Missouri with my kids, and we were at a Christmas party that night, and all these sirens are going off. And for my kids who were born in California, moving to the Midwest, back home for us, it was definitely like, hey, what are these sounds? What are these sirens? And in the aftermath of that, we talk about the helpers. We talk about people who get out there and do good in the world. One of the posts that I kept on seeing from a good friend of ours, Paul Taylor, was about Operation BBQ Relief. And I've been tracking them for about a year now. And it just so happens that David Marks and I were on a plane together, and he was maybe 5 seats behind me, talking about what they were doing at IAEM. For all those who know, I was on EM Weekly talking about that. And I heard him and I turned around and said, hey, here's a challenge coin. Let's connect. And I found out his role. And so really excited for David to be on the show with us. Welcome to the show, David.
Hey, great to be here. And, it must be nice sitting in first class.
I wish I was in first class. I think I was in a slightly better coach. Yeah. So who knew? But let's talk about, first of all the awards behind you. I'm looking at all these awards, these trophies. Is that you? Is that your kids? What is that from?
So I don't know, about 14 years ago, I got into competitive barbecue as a marketing strategy for a business. Found out I was pretty good at it. Found out that I actually found my people that I wasn't looking for, but I actually was a barbecue guy at heart, and that barbecue community I found was amazing. But I have been in competitive barbecue for many years. The core DNA for our organization really started in competitive barbecue, even though we've grown way beyond that. But many of those trophies are trophies I've won. The blue one in the middle, I'm pretty proud of. I did win an episode on Pitmasters.
Really?
Absolutely. That's a Kingsford trophy right there in the middle. Yes, sir.
Okay, first of all, I was thinking the sports, and of course, competitive barbecue. That's probably should have been the go-to. A little poor situational awareness on my end.
All good.
As a guy who likes barbecue himself, I have an offset. I have a Traeger where I get to cheat. As a guy who runs a small business, that Traeger has been like life-saving for a guy who wants to do barbecue. I'm interested. Do you do when you let's talk about beef ribs or even pork ribs, right? I'm assuming let's just talk about the process for a second, because I'm going to nerd out here for a guy who keeps winning. Do you put obviously the mustard rub on it? Is that your like base layer that you put on it, or do you use something else?
So I've gone back and forth over the years. I have found that a mustard binder is
Yeah.
the best way for me to go about it. I use mustard as a binder. It does not leave any mustard flavor. The vinegar and the mustard starts to penetrate the meat and then allow the rubs that I put on that pork ribs, beef ribs, doesn't matter. It starts to bring in those flavors, and I don't want to nerd out here either and start talking about layers of flavors and how you do that and melting points of sugars. That's another show, but absolutely, there's a lot of nuance. Being great transitions and translates in everything that you do in your life, and sweating the details and being prepared for those things is really important in competitive barbecue and everything else you do.
Okay, that is a great lead into what we should be talking about. All I want to talk about is layers of flavor, though. But maybe we could talk about the layers of flavor of work. By the way, I'm definitely going to have to ask you about this after the show, because I do a like an apple cider vinegar and apple juice mix for my spray. But I have some people who are like, never open it, but I open it every hour. We're going to talk about that later. I'm really excited for it. Anyways,
I'm into the core. I'm into the spritz.
You are into the spritz. Oh, okay. So I'm not missing. For the guy who has awards behind him, that's relieving to me. So Operation BBQ Relief, though, if you guys were in competitive barbecue, just from like a company perspective or organizational perspective, what was the switch there? Why did you go from competitions to, helping out disaster survivors?
So first of all, I met the co-founder of Operation BBQ Relief, Stan Hayes, at a national championship in Bentonville, Arkansas, at the world headquarters for Sam's Club, and he we had only done one disaster at that point, and I didn't even know who we were at that point in time. From there, however, Hurricane Sandy came up the East Coast, and I kind of had that, I guess we met for a reason moment.
Yeah.
One of the things that was really cool about barbecue and what barbecue did for us, and I'm kind of answer your question here, is
Please. Yeah.
as an organization, we were not steeped in disaster and really understanding disaster. As an organization, we were able to mobilize, use our resources, but the most important thing that we had was common language. We may not be able to talk about EFS6 and how an SEOC worked, in a huge disaster, but we knew how to speak the same language. And ultimately, in disaster response, being in this field now, years behind me, that common language has really been that success for us. And I think it's also what's the success when you bring all these different organizations together.
Real quick, we're going to pause for this week's Disaster Tough endorsements. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today. The L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at L3Harris.com right now. Okay, let's jump back in. Well, in every single after action report, this is for the emergency manager listening, all of our eyes start twitching a little bit when we talk about communications and common language, because on every single one, it says like communications is a problem. And so the fact that you guys immediately lead with like, we can integrate, we may not know all that other stuff, but we do this thing really well and we can speak same language. I think that's a fantastic place for anybody to start, just knowing who your audience is, right? I mean, we focus on that quite a bit from our business side with Doberman all the way through this podcasting, making sure the audience is fully engaged and understand what we can offer them, right? So
100%.
I think it's also interesting that you're talking about Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy, whatever you want to call it, because often when I talk to leaders and I say, how did you get involved in this? They don't say things like, I just like helping people, which is typically true. They usually name an event. And I think that's interesting that your event was something, I mean, you're in Philadelphia, you're close to Philadelphia, something hitting on the East Coast, kind of meshing that together.
Yeah, it was amazing for me going there, seeing the real devastation. I've seen the effects in my life, but I'd never seen real devastation like that. I'd never seen before the real equalizer that Mother Nature was. I remember we set up in this police athletic league, and we were cooking massive amounts of foods. We were serving the first responders, the National Guard. We were really helping these churches and different distribution points. But we had our own, for lack of a better word, soup kitchen going on at the same time. Place people could come, get a little respite, plug in their phone, charge it. And I'll never forget an old beat up Hyundai with a mother and 4 kids and all their laundry piled on top of them in their Hyundai. And then followed behind them was an older couple in a brand new Mercedes 550 SEL. And they both came to the same place for the same reason. It didn't matter how much money they had, what their economic worth was or needs that they could meet, because in that moment, they just needed a hot meal and a place to, frankly, dump off a little bit of their burden, what they were experiencing, and talk to somebody. And I learned that a little hope, a little friendship and compassion goes a tremendously far in an event like that.
That reminds me of an event I lived in Japan a couple times, and I taught over there and did a bunch of other stuff. And I still remember I had back-to-back meetings where people had called me up to ask me to go to their homes. And I walked into a dirt home, like dirt floor home, and missing teeth and really rough situation. And an hour later, I was in a skyrise with heated floors and all like and it was the fact that they were like literally across the street from each other. That was like burned into my memory. Funny enough, and the fact that they were asking for the same thing, volunteer service to support, and yeah, disasters do highlight the disparity between economic, standings because of insurance and everything like that. But food and relief, every human needs that. Talk about the great equalizer. And for we try to keep it fairly light on here, but those burned memories, man, really hit home of like what are the actual basics that people need? Food, shelter, clothing, we say that, but you just said kindness, compassion, working together. Definitely great call outs there for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, in that moment, people they really they don't know what the next right thing to do is so often. And
Yeah.
a hot meal kind of warms them from the inside out, uh, gives them that nutritional value that they may have been missing. So now their brain starts to think a little more clearly.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've seen this. I know I have. They talk about zombie apocalypse, and the truth of the matter is why there are no such thing as zombies. I've seen people walking in circles, not knowing what to do next, not knowing where to go, and what the next best thing to do is. And I really think in those moments, when we stop worrying about the hundreds of thousands of people that we impact and we deal with the person right in front of us, and we give them
Hmm.
that few minutes that they need. Maybe it's that meal, that nutrition, the caloric value. Maybe it's just the FEMA hotline number for assistance. Maybe it's, hey,
Hmm.
here's Team Rubicon's contact information to help them come and muck out your basement, like, or your
That's awesome.
home. Like, there's so many different things that we can provide people to get them to take the next right step.
Yeah. In fact, let's talk about your process then of getting people in front of you. So let's say a hurricane's barreling in, Hurricane Ian. You mentioned Hurricane Ian. When that is on cue for you guys, what is your process A to Z to actually get in front of people?
So, I mean, clearly the first thing is having good intelligence. We have some pretty good weather dating, prognosticating information. We from there
Good
start
word.
watching what's really happening. I'm sorry,
I said
you know,
good word.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I like words. That was a good word.
yeah. So prognostications is important. Then we start watching what those cones are doing and where that's heading. At some point, we start to stage equipment, resources,
Mm,
and supplies in a safe area, but close enough to make an impact. We have developed fast teams that go in and
mm,
are astute on quickly setting up, and also can start to serve a smaller amount of meals and fill that immediate need
mm.
as things are progressing. We can't stop and say we can't feed anybody until this is set up, because that's not the right thing to do. And at the same time, we can't say we're going to feed only these little people and then not really be able to expand our abilities to do the real impact that we're there to do in those large scale disasters. So we take a double pronged approach. We send in people who are trained for that exact job and role. And then as
Mhm.
soon as things are set up, we send in, different teams that are capable of other strengths and skill sets, productivity, and scale. So
So
from there,
just
we do
yeah.
look at. I'm sorry, we do look at. What is the impact zone? How many people are going to be affected? What are the how much power is going to be out? How many people are going to be in shelters? We start to
Mm,
watch shelter movement. We do watch all those other things, and frankly, all the way down to how many people are in the American Red Cross or Salvation Army shelters. To
mm.
and I'm going to say something, but the Waffle House rule, like, are they closing Waffle Houses? Are they still open? Like, that's a thing.
Yeah. It is a
That's
real thing. I had Craig Fugate on the podcast maybe, I don't know, looking at my producer over here, maybe close to a year ago, talking about how he came up with the Waffle House Index. and it was so basic, and yet we all talk about it. I just watched a video on Instagram where somebody was making fun of Hurricane Ian, and just like, he was pretending he was a different cities making fun of the hurricane. But either way, all of a sudden Waffle House popped up on there. This is guy who's not in emergency management. He's a comedian, and the fact that it's propagated so much that people are aware of that. Man, it's like, I love ingenious ideas that are simple to follow. So I think that's really fantastic, and it helps that their food, your food, it's a good connection there. In terms of like funding, right? Like, would my audience be like people that would provide funding to be able to support you guys, or are you funded by the state? Does the state request you? How does that process work?
So, as a really young organization, 11 and a half years old, we have been through many different genesis of how we're funded. We are mostly funded, frankly, by $50, $100 donations, $25 donations.
Awesome.
We never took a dollar from the government until COVID.
Yeah.
In COVID, we realized that we could make an impact, but our impact would be finite. We only had so
Yeah.
much money and we only had so much capability. Frankly, this leads into some amazing work that we did do across the country, but mostly with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We actually put together a plan to convert commercial food products. Half the country used to eat out at schools, universities, restaurants, etc., and the other half of the country ate from the grocery store and cooked at home. Well, those retail products, when everybody was forced at home, caused a huge problem because they weren't available on the shelves. So we actually put together 4 million meals in corroboration with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We could have never done that without, frankly, their funding, which ended up being fully funded by the federal government. But at the time, nobody knew how it was going to be funded, and they led with their chin. But
That's cool.
we did some amazing things, and we actually put restaurants to work. We created an economic impact. We had restaurants that were closed open back up, hire their employees back, put together the meals. We provided all the food and disposable supplies. They provided the environment, food safe environment, and the employees to get the work done. And then we handled all the logistics. 4 million meals, 9 weeks across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
That's,
So
I
that was
mean,
the first time we ever did that.
Yeah, talk about a huge win. 4 million meals. I think about in COVID, because I was in California and in Missouri because I moved during the time, and there was, the school districts requirements. I was actually just in Alabama. We were talking about that, the requirement, the law to provide meals to children even when the schools are closed down. And funny enough, as an emergency management program, they're starting to ask, in terms of emergency operations plans, school districts, how do we do meals and disasters? And I think it's a wise business decision to say, like, hey, we're in disasters. Disasters are run by public entities, so it makes sense that the public entity is funding it. But just for my audience, situational awareness, we weren't paid to do this. We weren't asked to do this. But again, I've been so impressed over the last year of everything you guys have been doing. We're going to put a link in our show notes just to say, hey, thanks for coming on, kind of thing. But as people look you up, for the audience perspective, from a guy who's been watching it, please, consider donating to your guys' cause. And especially because I love barbecue. And I was talking to Paul at IAEM. He's like, hey, man, you should volunteer some of your time and, barbecue with us in a disaster, which for a guy who's been on the public side so much, it'd be kind of a fun way to get into that. And so we should talk about that later. But at the same time, again, we'll put that link in there for everybody to, support.
OperationBBQRelief.org, OBR.org. And I'll tell you, you brought up something that's really important. And I think one of the things that really has helped us stand out, barbecue's comfort food. And, one of the things that I believe what we do, the psychology behind it, it's not just that we provide that meal, we provide barbecue, that comfort food that reminds people of good times of the past, maybe barbecues at their grandparents' house or friends and
Mm.
family and good times. And even though they're struggling in this moment, they get that hot barbecue, that hot pork sandwich, that hot, whether it's, pulled chicken or turkey or whatever it is we're providing that day. It reminds them that they'll have good times again in the future. They'll rebuild. They'll get beyond this. And I do think it's much more than just a hot meal. It is that comfort food. It is that muscle memory in their mind of times of past and times for the future.
Yeah, I think that's there was a case study done in Japan after the tsunami. They went in there and they gave people a regimen. They had them wake up all at the same time. They had them exercise. They gave them great food, and they tried to get them to return back to normal. And other people may not like this vernacular, but I like the idea of tricking. It's like you're telling your body that you have some good food. You're releasing those endorphins, like things are normal, and so you start feeling like you're normal. And the communities that didn't do that, they were still using like the MREs and still using like the really basic stuff that just like are not enjoyable. Didn't put them on a schedule. It took them a lot longer. The impacts of PTSD and the disaster were a lot longer, and they still are there versus the people who are immediately given that. And so, we've had off the grid on this show before. We're having you on the show. Like, I cannot stress to emergency managers enough. Like, get people like Operation BBQ Relief in front of you, because you're going to help out the people that need to recover in your community.
You bring up this amazing point. First of all, I'm so amazed at where my life has taken me and where the world has taken Operation BBQ Relief. I'm a restaurant guy who's now doing disaster full time.
That's pretty cool.
My entire life, literally, my father owned restaurants when I was a kid. I owned restaurants in my professional career. Irrelevant. Um, you know, I had such an amazing opportunity when the state of Florida contacted Operation BBQ Relief and specifically asked me to go to Sanibel Island after
Mm,
Hurricane Ian. I need you to go now, get on a barge, go to the island, go,
yeah.
go, go, go assess what's going on the island, who's there, what resources are there, what assets are available, who actually is physically on the island, what are their needs, and then put together a feeding plan. um
Yeah.
so I mean, first of all, like the honor of that for this little disaster organization was immense and not taken lightly. But the thing, to your point, that was amazing for me was as I got to the island and realized that the state had literally deployed their true disaster plan. The only thing I saw on the island besides people in a mess were pallets of airlifted MREs and water.
Hmm.
So they had
Yeah.
MREs and hot water. So one of the first things that we did was like start to bring normal. I need tractor trailers of water that are refrigerated. I
Yeah.
need tractor trailers of ice. Let's get them ice. Let's get them cold water. Frankly, I wasn't able to actually get it executed, but I was trying to bring on a coffee station for the island. So they actually had like coffee, just like these
Interesting.
simple things that everybody takes for granted as normal.
Yeah.
Then we get we had hot meals on the island the next day. And,
Wow.
you know, to put those things that bring some sense of normalcy to get them to be able, these people who've been affected, back to some semblance of normalcy, even if it's starting in their mind, because of this regiment, to your point. The state identified it, they allowed us to identify it. Together we realized that that was an important part of the plan to healing that island. And
Yeah.
to your point, that's exactly what we did.
Well, I'm gonna make a small caveat to my statement, just because the emergency manager who's listening here, who's ordered all those MREs and those pallets of water, and there's no disrespect to them. Like, their number one job is don't starve. But we are so blessed here in the United States, where we have all these organizations, Operation Barbecue Relief included, that can go out there and give them the sense of normal. And as soon as people start doing that, they can actually recover on their own instead of being dependent on other people to even literally function. I can't even tell you how many times when I'm barbecuing just in my neighborhood and all my neighbors are like, "What's that smell?" And they want to come over and it's a naturally like, camaraderie thing. Like even having hot meals and feeling that sense of normal. You're talking about coffee stations, you know. I don't drink coffee because it smells like manure to me, but everybody else I know like coffee. I'm like it's kind of funny. But if somebody gave me like a Monster Energy drink, I'm like, woo! I'm like all in. So it depends like what normal is for you. But yeah, like we have options to give them that here. And the emergency manager whose number one job is don't starve to death, no dehydration, good for getting MREs and water. But
Amazing.
if you can get beyond that stage, fantastic, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and they did their job. I mean, again, the state of Florida was amazing in the fact that they recognize we're not going to be able to support these people. We need to give them sustenance,
yeah,
hydration, nutrition, as minimum as it is. But then again, to your point, recognize that there was an opportunity. They did seek out Operation Barbecue Relief. They did ask us to really lean in with our chin and do what we could do for those people, and they get credit
mm.
for that.
What is your most popular barbecue item when you go out to disasters?
Oh man.
What do you guys like to do? Because like you can't do brisket. That takes 12 hours. You're not doing
So
briskets, right?
no, that's actually not true. We actually smoked 84,000 pounds of brisket during Hurricane Ian. Yeah, National
84,000
Beef
pounds.
National Beef was one of our sponsors, and they provided
Wow.
us with 2 tractor trailer loads of brisket, as well as left those reefer trailers there for us for our use. It was amazing,
Oh my
and
gosh.
it's a lot of fun. Now, we do use brisket, pork butts, turkey breast lobes, things
Mm,
that can smoke overnight. We've used
yeah.
mechanical advantage to really lever productivity for us. So
Yeah.
we do smoke large cuts overnight, and then we process in the morning. So
So you
we
have a
wake up.
fairly do you have a fairly large team that deploys? Like, how big is your fast team then?
So our fast team's probably about 15 people on that team,
Oh, wow.
but we quickly scale up to 100 people on site a day. Some of that is
Wow.
from our own internal teams, and then some of that um, are from the state's volunteer resource centers and the state's
Mm,
different volunteer organizations. We do really need the help of the volunteers. We could not accomplish what we do without our volunteers. They are our single most important resource and asset. We are very fortunate to have um, about 14,000 registered volunteers. But
mm.
of that number, like this year, probably 1,600 of them that have been active.
Wow, I mean, that's still really impressive, the fact that, like, you can go to scale. I think back and help me just understand logistically. So, Hurricane Katrina had so many failures for a lot of reasons. One of which is, there was 3 organizations, the Red Cross, the Southern Baptist Church, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints brought all this food out. The Southern Baptist Church refused to make it, and the Red Cross didn't want to get involved. So they created an MOU after that where the LDS Church or whatever brings out the food, the Southern Baptists make the food, and now the Red Cross distributes the food. So it's like removes, any kind of issue there. Um, as those MOUs are put into play, do you also have relationships with you talked about the VOAD. You have to be working with other groups. How does your relationship work? You talked about sponsor with food. How does that work?
So, first of all, clearly the single biggest thing that we all learned as NGOs from Katrina, and we did not exist until after
Right.
Katrina, but really the VOADs working together. The VOAD, the organizations working together is critical and key.
Mm,
I am more and more hopeful every day that we will really be able to lean into you do this well, you do this well, and you do this well. So let's all do those things well and really
yeah.
impact the most people at the most critical parts of time. For me, I have actually had, and our organization have had conversations with people like Marcus Coleman. And I don't know if you know
Mm,
who Marcus is, but for those who don't, He's one of the top dogs over there at FEMA. He's in charge of community and faith-based
Oh,
organizations.
Coleman.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, Marcus Coleman. And I've had the opportunity and been blessed to be able to have the ability to get a hold and have conversations with people like Marcus, where we talk about like, how do we continue to change now that the NGOs, the VOADs are really working together? And we're a major part of things like IAEM and being able to contribute. But how do we really start to contribute with the federal government and really be able to make impact? And we've had some of those conversations with Marcus and others, and I see the change happening. A lot of people like to talk about the failures, but the failures are in the past, and they are blocks for learning. But I really see the federal government, FEMA, private sector organizations like yours, private, public, nonprofits like Operation BBQ Relief and the others you mentioned, as well as businesses and companies that can make a difference in these times. And we're all really working together, and it's continuing to improve. For me, it's been amazing to see in the last 11 and a half, 12 years. And it is really amplifying in speed right now. I see it happening. I've been in the conversations, and I've seen others doing it as well. I believe that we are going to really continue to improve that multi-pronged approach where everybody contributes and makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's emergency management to its core, right? Like, you have to be a hub. Anybody who thinks they can do it alone, they fail epically. And it's funny in disasters, and we're not naive to this. Like, there's competing interests, right? Like, there's competing interests from NGOs, from funding sources, from even public entities. Like, there was a disaster was. We were sending commodities from one county to another county, and a sheriff pulled over the federal, like the FEMA truck, and at gunpoint said, "That's going to my county now." That's ridiculous. Like, there's competing interests, and we don't have to be naive to that. However, I agree with you. In all aspects, the leaders like yourself who come onto this podcast and say it's more effective to work together because the mission, and by working together, we're able to do more and grow. And that's like having you guys on the show. You talk about being a young company at 11 or 12 years. We're 5 years. This podcast is 3 years. We're lucky to be the number one show and to have thousands of listeners, and we're grateful for everybody who's listening right now. However, the whole idea here is that, like, I hate the phrase whole community, and I make fun of it pretty often. Like, you don't need to say whole community. You just need to say community. It's like, if I'm going to eat an apple, I don't need to tell people I'm going to eat the whole apple. They're just going to assume I'm going to eat the whole apple unless I say something else. And so we've been addressing the terms, the culture, the proposition that we put out to help people in disasters, and quite frankly, businesses and other stakeholders that are not typically in disaster response historically don't really get it. And now they're starting to see that between frequency and between COVID and between all these other things, it does take, quote unquote, a wolf pack to come in and support. And I can't say this enough. Like, proud to see friends like Paul and to meet your people like you who get out there and say, like, hey, like, we're going to do something about this. We're going to help people out. So, with closing comments here, thanks again, David. To direct people to your Operation BBQ Relief, you mentioned the website earlier. One last final pitch for the people listening to this show.
Hey, look, Operation BBQ Relief is out there. We're one of many organizations. We do, we inspire, connect, serve, educate, and feed people in need. We do it with a little hope, a little friendship, and compassion. If you're interested in learning more, please go to obr.org. And I really appreciate you sharing your microphone with our organization today. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Well, I believe in what you guys are doing. We didn't even talk about Kentucky. Maybe we'll have you back on sometime and talk about, doing after action of Kentucky. Thanks for talking about Hurricane Ian and Sandy and how you got involved. It definitely sounds like a guy from a restaurant business to, helping out disaster survivors. Pretty cool story. For all those who are listening to our show, again, we're going to put the website in our show notes, but make sure this is what we do every time. Like and subscribe, 5-star review. share this episode. If you have a comment where you have a positive story about Operation BBQ Relief, or you also have a broader discussion of how food and nutrients and healthy living can help out disaster survivors, we would love to see that in the comments of our social media channels. We're all across the board. I think one of my producers or one of my team members even started a TikTok channel that kills me inside a little bit, but we're everywhere. Disaster Tough Podcast. Tag us, tag Operation BBQ Relief, and we'll see you for the next one.